Hello, friends, and welcome to another exciting episode of Today with Tally. The mission and goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and search Today with Tally. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the program as well. Ladies and gentlemen, your host of the evening, Mr. Brian Tally.
Welcome back to Today with Tally podcast, where we add real life value to the lives of everyday people. We're on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Anchor FM, Spotify, and About Face Radio. Simply search Today with Tally and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to get every episode and stay up to date with the latest and greatest our guests in this show has to offer. Folks, today's show sponsor is author John Henley. Now, author John Henley is a respected best-selling author who served in the U.S. Navy on submarines and then went on to serve as an officer of the CIA. He is now living out his dream as an author and is giving back to the community he cares deeply about. If you are an aspiring author and need a mentor, or perhaps you want to collaborate with a best-selling author, contact author John Henley today. John has developed a unique program that specializes in helping military veteran authors get recognized and get you the exposure you need to be a successful author. John believes that writing, creating, and using your imagination and putting a book together is a healthy way to deal with post-traumatic stress and is a wonderful coping strategy to occupy your mind, body, and spirit while surrounding yourself with a positive and meaningful hobby. Contact author John Henley today, and he can give you that final push and encouragement to reach your goals. Visit authorjohnhenley.com. That's authorjohnhenley.com, and select your story and follow the prompts. Folks, we have a very special guest joining us on today's program. And before we get started, I kind of want to set this up a little bit. This show today is going to be, we're going to be talking about suicide. And it's not just veteran suicide. It's not just military suicide. It's suicide. Our country is going through some pretty tough times, and the suicide rate is absolutely through the roof, from children all the way up until grown adults. And it has got to stop. And I know there's ways out there that people can deal with tragedy and loss and certain coping skills, and how to help put an end to this, and to talk about it in ways that isn't typically openly talked about on forums like this. So I do want to warn you, we will be talking about suicide today, suicide prevention. This program is going to be vulnerable. My next guest is going to be extremely vulnerable. It's going to be real. It's going to be raw, and it's going to be to the point. Now, Aaron Childress survived suicide by hanging. His wife walked into their garage and saw him in a noose and rushed to him holding his full weight in her arms. He does not know how long he was in the noose, but it could be anywhere from 4 to 30 seconds. She held on to him for a few minutes, thinking he was dead. After this, he would discover a path to healing. Now, he has just released a new book titled These Thousands of Days. This is what I learned after I killed myself. And with that, we are honored to be joined by Aaron Childress. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Hey, I'm hanging in there, man. Another day, another dollar. I woke up this morning with a lot of gratitude on my heart. And, I'm very honored, and I'm very excited to have you on the show today. I know you're going to add so much value to our listeners out there through your real life experience. And, again, I know your words and your book can help save lives. And I'm really excited to get started with you here.
Perfect.
So let's kind of learn a little bit about Aaron. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where you from? Where you grew up? What was life like as a kid?
Oh, shoot. I mean, that's chapters 1 through 4 in the book. I was born in Wichita, Kansas, but I do not really remember Wichita so much because when I was very young, my family and we moved to Houston. And so I grew up in Houston, right next to Johnson Space Center, which is kind of how everything kind of started. My mom right now, she's an engineer. She's a pioneer in the engineering world for women. Like, she's sought after by some of the top companies in the world constantly for what she's done for women in aerospace. My dad has multiple master's degrees and all these different things. He's sought after in aerospace as well. However, when we lived in Houston, they were just beginning their careers, and my dad was bagging groceries and going to college. My mom was just starting out working on F-16 simulators and very low and on the rung. And so the kids I went to school with were, their parents were little rocket scientists, at NASA, right next to us. And I was just a poor kid in Clear Lake City, Texas, and I got beat up and bullied constantly because of that. Was my childhood. That was basically what it was small kid, poor, and bullied. And it was a weird mixture because I was also really good at sports. And usually the jock is not bullied, but just because of the income difference there and the intellect difference, perceived intellect difference, that, their parents were rocket scientists, mine were bagging groceries. It caused a lot of friction despite how far I was going in sports at the time. And so that was Houston. We lived that whole dream there. And then my mom, as her career took off, got a really cool job at Boeing in Wichita. So we moved here to Wichita, and I was kind of hoping that, life would change, but my mentality didn't. I was just this kid that thought that I was worthless. So when we moved here, I didn't realize that my mind put off those vibes, basically. So it didn't matter that we changed scenery. My whole demeanor was, hey, beat me, And so we moved here. Same thing kept going, excelling at sports, yet still getting beat up and bullied constantly. And one of the things I talk to with people when I do keynotes and speak is, you don't see a lot of pictures of me smiling with my teeth because I got multiple broken teeth in my mouth. That was from getting beat up in middle school and whatnot. And that caused a lot of friction, especially in academics. My parents couldn't figure out why I would get 95s and 98s on tests, yet my class, my grades were like 40s and 50s. It's because I wasn't going. I would hide in the bushes outside of school or just not go. I would sit at home or just play sick. And so they enrolled me in an after-school academy, and that academy had me to keep a journal of what I was going through as far as school and everything. And that went well for like a month, and then the kids found it. And so I got called the hard R word, the one the rhymes was started. I got called that once they found the journal, and then got beat up more. And but I continued with my after school pursuits. I did school in the morning, and then I did after school at night, which kind of hurt my sports pursuits at that time. And then I graduated at 16 because I was sick of being there. It wasn't big. I tell people I was graduated at 16 years old, and they're like, "Oh, you must have been smart." I'm like, well, maybe, but I did it because I was tired of getting, beat up every day. Then I hit my growth spurt. So I wasn't small anymore. I was, 5'1" in high school. And then all of a sudden I went up to 6 foot at 17 years old. And ended up just kind of getting out of that mix, and then joined a rock band, started working on furniture. I mean, I just did anything I could just because, all my, the people that I went to school with were still in school. I didn't have anybody to talk to anyway. So I just started getting into all different pursuits, joined a rock band, started working on furniture, doing all sorts of cool stuff. Started a graphic design business because it allowed me to kind of just stay behind a computer. And then, 9/11 happened. And then just like, the story's been told, ad nauseum, through like all of us. We all kind of joined around 9/11, or at least, around that time. And, I joined in September of 01, and then did the delayed entry program, went into the Marine Corps. For the first time, it was neat. For the first time, I had like a group of friends. I had a lot of friends, and we were all, there was other poor people there. So I was no longer in a community that had all rich people, which seems like where I had always ended up in this, civilian war. Now I was in a place where we were all poor, because, that's what war is. We send the poor kids. And so that's what we all were. And unfortunately, those friends, I ended up losing about, it was 19 of them. A lot of them I had gone through like boot camp and then infantry school with, but then a lot of them were like very close friends, like my best friend and some other people and people like my roommate. And that was my Marine Corps experience. I don't get too heavy into that, because what happens if I get into the Marine Corps talk is it becomes, like, let's tell Marine Corps stories, and Marine Corps is about less than 10% of my life, and from the Marine Corps and all the damage that went on in my mind, had been going on in my mind since I was a child, just a bullied and beaten kid, poor kid, going into being in the Marine Corps and losing all my friends. I thought the next best thing that I should do should start a family, right? Because that's, the smart thing to do. And the way I describe that to people is, I don't even know how to love. At this point in my life, I had buried more buddies than I had even had birthdays for myself, and I don't think anybody's prepared for that grieving process. I think you have like a grandparent die when you're younger and you deal with it on that level. You're not prepared for dozens of, burials and lost friends before you can even have a low insurance rate, and so
you had said that you felt worthless, when you were a kid, growing up, and, you didn't have the best of childhood experiences. You were bullied, and a lot of what I see, especially, veterans, that get out, a lot of their problems do stem, from their childhood experiences. And unless you face that stuff head on, it will follow you, for your life. Now, why do you think that you got bullied when you were younger? And is that indeed true? When you were in the Marine Corps, you kind of had that. I mean, was there some sort of anger that you brought with you to the Corps that stayed with you? And, like you said, I didn't have feelings. I had a hard heart.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's almost to the core of why my story is what it is. And the first time that I really experienced it was when I was really little. I got tricked to going in a treehouse, and the kids pushed me out, and then they all laughed at me. I almost broke my ankle. Couldn't walk for a while, and I remember that, and I looked at that, and I was like, as a little kid, I didn't really know the full weight of what was going on. But later in life, I looked back and said, like, man, that was one of the defining moments of my life when I first had an experience with bullying, and so it changed my mind. It made me feel as though, like, I was just a joke. I was, and not like funny, like I'm telling a joke. I was used as a prop for other people's jokes. And so that's what it made me feel like when I was a kid. And then that continued to happen. Another one was on Valentine's Day. It was 5th grade. And we had these kids whose parents were, rocket scientists or whatever they were. They were probably at NASA. I mean, most kids in that neighborhood were doing something like that. Like Lockheed Martin is right next door. And, it was Valentine's Day. I never got a card. This was back before you gave a card to everybody. I was probably the cause of that, but I didn't get a card usually on these things. So I got one day and I opened it up and it was blank. Sure enough, the kids behind me were doing it just as a joke. And they were laughing, just thought it was hilarious. And that was another point where I realized I was just a prop for a joke. It wasn't, it wasn't all that profound. I was just a prop, people wanted to laugh and I was an easy target. And so they did it. And that just continued. And then it progressed into the point when in middle school, it started to become like, because I had been a prop, they were like, the human mind just cannot, is not satisfied. It has to go further. And so just laughing at me wasn't enough. And so in middle school, it became like, hey, we can actually beat this kid up too. And so then I just started getting in fights. I'd say getting in fights, but I would just stand there and, how kids are, they would push you and be like, you want to fight? And I'm like, no. And then boom, there it is. And then, yeah. And that's how I felt is I felt like a prop for a joke.
A lot of veterans get out of the military broken.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you entered the service an angry, broken man?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I didn't want to join the Marine Corps. My dad was a Marine it was well before I was born, but I didn't really necessarily want to join the military. I had thought about it early on, but because of my academics, it was going to be a little bit difficult. So I just really, until 9/11, had no intention of doing it. And then when I did, all these unresolved things from my childhood were still there. I was still bullied and I felt like a prop for somebody's joke. So the first, 13 weeks of boot camp, they're like trying to tear me down. And I'm like, look, dude, like I've said all these things to myself and worse, you're not, I didn't really affect me as much in boot camp because I was already low. Like you skip, like let's just skip to like week 7. Now you can start building me up again. I'm already low. Mm-hmm. And it played a major factor in who I was as a Marine though, because I was about 2 years older than everybody else when I joined. And it was, so I got put into leadership inadvertently. Like it was just, oh, you're the older guy, you're gonna be, a leader. Like, well, that now you give and what I always tell people is leadership is a neutral term. The person behind that leadership is what makes it positive or negative. And I was an incredibly negative person. So you can imagine my first leadership was like, I was that guy. The one that they're like, I don't, the bullying and abusive leader. I became what I was. Mm-hmm. As a leader, and I was training people to be the same way. So definitely my childhood had a huge factor in it.
Sure. So you would go on and you would serve 4 years honorably mm-hmm. in the United States Marine Corps. Where did life take you afterwards?
Oh, it went everywhere. After I got out, I went back. My first job after I got out was I was a janitor. Yeah, because, you think when you get out, I had my resume said like I should be a director. Because I got out at E4 corporal. And I thought, well, shoot, I've been in charge of people. I should be a manager somewhere. So my resume had like manager, director, all this stuff. And first job I got was janitor. And I was a janitor for a little bit. And that obviously wasn't cutting it. So ended up becoming something I had done prior. I was a graphic designer, which brought me into doing videography, camera work, touch-ups, studio work, and then couldn't find anybody to do the websites for that. So I started doing websites for people, and I learned different coding languages and whatnot to go along with it. So became a full spectrum media person, all the way from coding all the way up to filming commercials and TV and whatnot. So, and that took me far. I mean, I was doing great with that. And in my relationship with my wife, we were starting to struggle because, again, I'm just a terrible, my leadership skills, though I had learned a little bit about leadership in the Marine Corps, I was not doing great. I still had not healed from anything in my childhood or even in the Marine Corps at this point. In fact, I was probably worse. So my media, my digital design and media and camera work suffered through that because my wife and I were suffering, and it caused a lot of problems with clients because I couldn't make meetings, and there was a lot of infighting and, just turmoil with that whole relationship. And kind of a weird out of nowhere, after the design stuff, I got a call about baseball again, which I had played for years in as a child, and then and successfully enough to where I had scholarships, even though I had bad grades. I was getting scholarships before I joined the Marine Corps. Well, after the Marine Corps, I was getting scholarships for baseball and football again, and to the point where even an Los Angeles Angels scout, I think they might have been Anaheim at the time though, but Los Angeles Angels scout even found me and said, "Hey, we're still wanting to play?" And I had 2 surgeries in the Marine Corps my last few months to repair a torn Achilles and ankle. And when they found that out, they were like, nah, once I did the physical, they were like, nah, no good. So that brought me into baseball, where I was doing design. Now all of a sudden I was doing baseball, and I was doing one-on-ones with players and whatnot. And then from there, got hired as a college baseball recruiting coordinator all the way up to head coach. Became a college baseball head coach. And this whole time, my marriage was just horrible. Like, we were at each other's throats constantly. And she's an awesome lady. We had 3 children. I love them all, but I was just a terrible, terrible leader. And I'm doing all these different things, coaching baseball, marriage is falling apart. And that's where everything fell apart, was right then, because it was going into business, and it was going into my work life. And the college I was working at noticed it, and they said, "Hey, something's up," and I wasn't willing to fix it. So
yeah, your brokenness and your anger, has followed you, all the way up to the point. I mean, I just, listed Marine, janitor, graphic designer, videography, studio work, TV, web design, media, even a baseball coach, at the college level, all while your marriage was struggling, and again, I think it all relates back to when you were a kid getting picked on, and that anger just got bottled up. It got bottled up. It got bottled up. You always saw yourself as being worthless. And so you always said, yeah, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to create my own destiny. And that's where all of these jobs that you had and all of these passions that you had, you did, all while not maintaining a healthy relationship at home. And that's where things can start to really fall apart. Now, let's get into your book. You just wrote a book that was just released, I believe, this last week, and it's available everywhere books are sold online. The author, again, Aaron Childress, These Thousands of Days. This is what I learned after I killed myself. What is this book all about, Aaron?
This book is about me, then it's about you, then it's about we. So it goes me, you, we. And it goes in 3 parts. And the first part is the story of, the title. This is what I learned after I killed myself. It goes into the story of me killing myself. And I say it that way because I've been, and this is part of the story, is after I did what I did, I got put on a national circuit to talk to people all over the country about suicide. And I met a lot of family members and people that had been affected by this. And, it put me into a learning cycle. And that's where it transitioned from me into the next part of the book, which is you, which once I started to learn my processes with my mind, I wanted to show others. And then once I showed others, I wanted to make sure that we all show the world. So that's what the book is about. It's not just suicide. It's a shocking moment of suicide at the front of the book to say, like, here's what it looks like and it's if you read it correctly, it's gory because I don't spare details, but I keep it artistic. I don't, I do it sort of in a poetic frame. But it says what it is. It says what it looked like from my point of view as I describe as the circuits are being turned off. And that's what the book is about.
Aaron, when you decided on this fateful day to take your own life, how long had you been thinking about this, and how much work did you put into it?
Never thought about it. Wasn't ever going to do it. And then I was sitting in the living room, actually about 15 feet from where I'm sitting right now, and was having a good day. Everything we talked about earlier, I was that person. I was the abused, bullied person. I was that. I was depressed. However, depression, if you put it in like in a ball, like here's depression inside there, the particles, are bouncing up and down and all around inside of there. And when it's up, I was in a good mood. I was the person that was dancing around on social media and then they put the tag and it says 12 hours later, she killed herself, that kind of stuff. I was happy, yet I was a depressed person, which is possible. You can be depressed, but you're okay. You're kind of happy in that moment. And I had not thought about killing myself ever. Wasn't necessarily a thing, at least in this context. I had thought about, I think everybody's thought about it, but like the actual emotion of doing it had never had that. And I was just sitting in my recliner and my wife and I were just having a normal conversation. And then, as I describe it in the book, an ineffable urge hit me, like beyond any description of any term I could give anybody. It was not me. It was so real. Any word I would give to it would not translate properly to the English language or any language. It was just like all the circuits were turning off, and it was like a mission. And that's what it was. It was not, I didn't care what I ate that day. I didn't care about writing a note. I didn't care about saying anything to my wife. I didn't care to be found. I didn't care about it. I so much did not care about those things that I didn't even know that I didn't care about them. Nothing was on the table. It was off. I turned everything off. I unplugged and went, and that was it. And yet I was not technically sad at the moment. I was just a depressed person in the height of, I was not having I think we were watching baseball. And I was like watching baseball and it was fine. And then like that, a couple of moments later, I was in that door behind me in the garage hanging that quick. There was no chance to call me. There was no chance to say stop because I didn't say anything to her. I didn't say anything to my wife. She just knew something was wrong because of the way I got up. It was just so inhuman. Or unhuman. It was not anything normal. So yeah, that was.
So I mean, everything's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Besides you being depressed, you go to the garage, you grab a rope,
mm-hmm.
and you tie a noose, and you hang yourself.
Yeah. I don't even remember tying the noose. I must have I was a robot, I guess. I remember walking out there, and I don't even know how. I know it wasn't like an official noose. It was an electrical cord actually, but I know that kind of makes the conversation weird, so I always just say rope. But I just tied it in a regular knot, and then hopped in and did it, and we don't really know how long I had been there. It wasn't hours because obviously I would have been dead. The doctors have said I have about anywhere from 4 to 30 seconds once I would have done it because I didn't break normally you break your neck when you do it. When you jump off, you break your neck. I didn't break my neck. I don't know if I just didn't do it right or what I did wrong. But when I went down, it didn't sever the spinal column. And so I was basically like in a huge chokehold. So my carotid artery was being choked out. And so you have anywhere from 4 to 30 seconds. And that's just for being aware. If nobody's in the house, you have 4 to 30 seconds to be able to stop yourself. You have a little bit longer if somebody's there because obviously you'll get choked out and you'll be knocked out and they can hopefully revive you. You have anywhere maybe a minute or two if somebody finds you. So we don't know exactly how long I was there. My wife, little old lady, she had injured her ankle earlier in the day. And so she ran out on one ankle, like she hopped out to me and then grabbed me by the waist. And I remember just what it felt like was, the worst the worst armbar you could, or the worst chokehold you could be in. It's the pressure is just intense. Like you feel like your eyeballs are popping out. There's a jet engine in your ears. Like it's like you're standing right next to a jet engine, because it's just the blood and the pressure is just like your ears are screaming. My face was on fire. Like it just felt like my face was melting. And you can't. I've never been in a fire. I've never been like in a smoke fire where like in a house and I couldn't get out. But that's how I would say, like I was trying to breathe. You can't like make it happen, because it's all caught up. You're there. Yet I wasn't trying to like get myself out of anything. And it was just, my face was on fire. It just felt like circuit breakers were being turned off all around. And then, you get I'm sure everybody has seen this, when you get like when you get really lightheaded, you get those white wisps, going in the corners of your eyes, and there's sparks and everything flying and bulbs popping in your eyes. And that's what was going on. And as it's starting to fade off and I'm not getting, I'm not seeing much, I'm just seeing this happen. I see like this dark blur come through that door right there and just boom, hit me. And I'm just so entranced in this. I'm like, I don't know at this point in my life, is it hell? I don't know what to define right now. I'm just like, is this what hell did the devil just tackle me? What is this? I don't know. But I just see this boom, and then pressure at my waist. And it ended up being my wife on her one leg with her messed up ankle. And she just grabs onto me and lifts up like that. And she holds me. And I do remember being really angry, because I didn't tell her anything on purpose, because I didn't want her to stop me. Like I wasn't trying to get caught. I was trying to do this, and that was it. And so I was really angry, and I kept trying to, with whatever cognition I had left, I was trying to push off of her and try to, at that point, I was like, maybe if I get away from her, I can actually break my neck and do this, which was, I knew I hadn't, because I was like, if I'm like still, I was like, I knew I had failed initially. So I was like, if I can get away from her and get a jump in, I could probably break my neck and get this over with. And she held on to me. We don't know how long she held on to me. It could have been hours. It was such a weird, all time turned off for me. I went from past, present, future to eternity. Like I was an eternal person at that point, no longer thought of past and present. So as far as I knew, we were there for 2 hours. We could have been there for 35 seconds.
So when this happened, did you ever lose consciousness?
I was right there. I was right. She was, I think right when she hit me is right when it was going, right when she came to me.
When she got you down, where did you go, and what did that look like? Were you ashamed? Were you embarrassed? Were you even more angry? What was going through your mind when she got you down and you figured out what had just happened and what you just went through?
I didn't figure out what happened. Well, when she got me down, I was very angry. I was beyond angry. I didn't know. But then that anger turned to a confusion. I thought this for years. So this next thought that happened was, I don't know if you've seen Groundhog Day, the movie Groundhog Day, where he wakes up in a cycle every day. I actually felt like I succeeded. I couldn't really define what situation I was in. I just felt like this weird situation, like maybe even Sixth Sense, that movie, if you could think of that, where I was like, did I do it? Like what is, I don't have any definition of what hell or heaven or purgatory could be. Like, I just know that, like, I did it. I 100% did it. But what am I in right now? Is this just like some sort of weird sort of simulation type thing? And I wasn't sure. Anybody who talked to me, I wasn't even sure what angle they were coming from, because I wasn't 100% sure if I had succeeded or not. And so we initially, right after getting down, went to the hospital, and obviously, because we had to do medical and mental evaluations at that point. And the hospital, I mean, the looks on their faces were just like they had seen a ghost, which wasn't helping my situation because I thought I might be a ghost. I didn't know. But the looks on their face when we come in there, they're like, "What are you guys in here for?" And I was like, "I hung myself." I was like, "I hung myself," and that's all I said to them. And they their faces turned pale white, because I think so often we deal with people that think about it or are struggling. But when somebody comes in and they're like, "Yeah, I just did it," it shocked them because nobody's ready for that. You're just not. You're not ready for death. You're not ready for this kind of situation. You're not ready for car accidents. You're not ready for these things. And what I found out later was the rarity of what I had gone through. It's around a 5% survival rate for what I did. There's some suicide like pills. Pills, they usually say around 85, sometimes 85 to 90% people survive pill attempts. Gunshots are around 5%, and that usually just becomes, they don't have a quality of life afterwards, usually with a firearm. And it's same with hanging. Hanging, it's around a 5 to 8%, but the problem is you also, if you're there too long, and I've met many of these people since, and they're in 24/7 365 care. They can't speak. They don't have hardly any cognition. Some of them are in comas for years. So the fact that I walked into a hospital, I had to help with my wife, and she kind of just walked me in there. They were shocked. I was like, "I hung myself," and they were like, "What?" And I remember them just like being in like not turmoil, but like it was almost like ER moment, but not. So they were like, they got me into somebody. They had to check out medical stuff. They had to check out, neck and everything, and mental. But I was angry. I was angry and confused because I thought I had succeeded, and I wasn't sure how to approach anything at all.
Now, Aaron, your wife at the time saved your life. Now, since this incident has happened, you have divorced, and you have remained good friends with your ex-wife, and you guys have both healed from that incident. Now, I want to know, how has this impacted your children? Has it put a strain on your relationship with your loved ones and with your children, or has this really, brought about more of living in the moment and more love and more peace and more hope and more joy to that relationship, having you gone through what you went through?
Initially, it ruined everything. It ruined everything. One of the doctors warned me very early on during all the, possible relapses of everything, said, "Now look, most marriages do not survive these type things. You don't survive babies dying. You don't." They said marriages suffer in these instances, and I was like, "Yeah, we were already suffering, so most likely." And sure enough, we divorced. My kids, my relationship with them got terrible. I just became an even more angry person than before. Now, I was never an abusive person. That's one thing I'm thankful for. I never caused any damage in that aspect, at least physical. I will tell people, and I do say this: suicide isn't a form of abuse to your family. I will tell you that. So though I was not physically abusive, that is a huge emotional scar I gave to people that they didn't deserve. So that is abusive in that aspect. And it caused huge damage to the point that when we went through the divorce, my kids said they did not want to see me ever again. And I didn't even see my kids for a long time when we went through the divorce. But through this process, I went to a doctor, and it was not a VA doctor. I went to a doctor, and they locked me up in a place because they thought there might be a possible relapse. And this doctor was I never found out what country it was, but he was from a foreign country that was in civil war his whole life growing up. And he said to me, "Look, I have to go see somebody at the end of the day and I hear everybody's worst day, the worst things they ever say. And I have to put that stuff somewhere. And it blew my mind because I was like, you're the guy helping me. I'm the one that hung myself, and you're telling me you have to see somebody? Come on, man. And at first I was angry at him because that's who I was as a person. And then I sat back and I was like, that makes sense. He hears the worst of everything. My whole life has been the worst of everything. He puts it somewhere. I was like, I've not been putting this anywhere or doing anything with it, all the way back to getting pushed out of the treehouse, And I was like, okay. And so it was a turning point for me. And then I started to see in my ex-wife, I started to see what I had done to her at that point. And I had seen that the light in her eyes was gone. And then I realized that the kid who got pushed out of the treehouse at 5 years old, that was one step towards the rope or the drop. And when my wife came out there and found me, she found me in the drop. Yet a 33-year-old man didn't hang himself in that garage. A 5-year-old boy did. And when I saw that look on my wife's eyes, I was like, I don't know where she'll end up, but I just gave her one step towards her drop. And that's when it became something different. Now, all of a sudden, I was like, oh my gosh, it's not me anymore. How can I fix me? Because look what I did to somebody else. And that doctor telling me that allowed me to kind of open up to go like, I've got to put this somewhere so I don't do that to somebody else again. And it was a funny situation. I was laying in the floor. It was funny, Shakespearean, I guess you could say. I was laying in the floor, and I just sunk into this weird moment where I just saw all my memories coming in front of my face, and the sad ones. I saw my best friend just, chewed up and spit out in his last moments. And I was just like, it was sad, angry, disgusting. And I just saw all these emotions flash before it. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And I just called them all out. I called out everything that it was and put it in a box in my mind. I was watching it happen in my mind. And then I pulled up happy ones, and I was like, I'm going to bring up some happy ones because my best friend, his name was Bradley. He had 8 toes, and we named him Toes. That was his nickname. And he had like the worst smelling feet ever, and I could not believe how bad he could make 8 toes smell. And so I brought up that memory, and it made me laugh. And I was like, funny, and I laughed, and I was like, that makes me happy. And then it just started happening. I was like, what am I doing? And it was like pulling up your Apple TV and picking between movies. I was doing that with my memories and my mind and everything. And I was like, this is what the doctor was talking about, putting it somewhere, doing something. And what I was doing 2 things. I was doing metacognition, and I was doing a technique called name it, tame it, which I didn't know this at the time. I was doing a technique called name it, tame it, which is it's actually Dr. Dan Siegel of UCLA is the one who came up with that. And I was naming my emotions and the memories, and I was putting them where they needed to be in my mind instead of letting them float free and being just chaos. And so I was organizing my mind, and I sunk so deep into it that it became a very deep meditation. And I found this all out after I researched, and I was like, oh my gosh, I did meditate, but I thought that was this thing, and it's not, and I was, so all of a sudden, the worst moment in my life, that one conversation from a doctor, everything turned. Now I had a tool, and I had to develop it. So that's when the transition happened.
Now I got a few questions before you get into the tools. Now, when we opened up on this, the one of the first things I said is that your childhood experiences will always follow you unless you tackle them head on as an adolescent, if you will. And you would end up joining the Marine Corps and then going through some traumatic events there. And then your anger would essentially ending up compounding like interest that led you to your suicide attempt, and put you on the course on the life that you are living today. Now, the truly remarkable thing about your story is that everything goes back to that 5-year-old kid. And that right there is powerful. Yeah. That's extremely powerful. And so I want to know a few things. When did this happen?
The getting pushed out of the treehouse.
No, when did your suicide attempt happen?
So, so that is something that is very huge, and I wish people would understand. I have every year, as being somebody that was in the Marine Corps infantry, we have anniversaries, and they're not the good ones. We have I have the October 27th, the January 26th. I have all those, the ones where we struggle.
Mm-hmm.
I had one good one. And that was my wedding anniversary. And so my mind was so twisted that on my wedding anniversary, September 2nd, that's when I did it. The one good anniversary I had, I did it on that day.
What year was this?
It was 2012.
And how old were you then?
33.
So for 33 years of your life, you lived a miserable, angry, broken life.
Yeah.
For 33 years. Now, how old are you now, Aaron?
43 now.
So what has your last 10 years look like?
Eternal. I don't live in time anymore. I'm a new thing. I'm in the present. It's been amazing. It's peace, it's wholeness. Some people will say that the search is for happiness, but I believe happiness is an emotion, and I have even control of my happiness. I can be sad, I can be happy, I can do whatever I need to do because I'm in complete control of the computer of my mind and the vehicle of the body, through my soul, my consciousness, my awareness. I'm at more peace than is possible in this existence. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. It's beyond definition, actually.
Right. You are living an overwhelming amount of gratitude.
Yeah.
You are very lucky to be alive. And now you get to tell your story in a way that can add so much real life meaning to others that may be going through a lot of turmoil and anxiety and depression and hardship and all of the crazy accolades of life that we deal with. Yeah. Life is hard. And a lot of times, we're put into these crisis type situations and we don't know how to get out of them. We don't know how to use tools that are given to us. So we think the hopelessness and the helplessness is all we have. And then you get driven into this anxiety riddled state with no way out. Now, what you have done is you have, again, you practice meditation. You practice mindfulness. And right now you are in a very good mental state. Your well-being is probably as good as it's ever been. Have you ever really fully healed from you, kid?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I'm healed, cured. I have no, I don't know how, I have no part of that in me anymore. I am a new thing. 100% yes, I'm cured, healed, no turning back.
Now, I want to say something, guys. We're joined by Aaron Childress. He's a former U.S. Marine, and he has a very real and raw story of survival of a suicide attempt. And he has broken his silence, if you will. He has written a book, and that book is titled These Thousands of Days. This is what I learned after I killed myself. We're some 10 years down the road from this suicide attempt, and he has put pen to paper, if you will, to tell his story that does begin with the me and the you and the we. And I can tell you right now, from what I've heard about this book that was just released from the friends of mine that have picked it up and that I've gotten through a couple of chapters already, that this is a book that will indeed save lives. And it's for everybody. He's not saying, hey, look, I'm here to stop veteran suicide, military, suicide. We all struggle in life. We are all human beings. And like Aaron pointed to, he served 1/10 of his life. That's it, 1/10 of his life in the military. And this book is for everybody. It's for every walk of life. And that is where I think that this book is going to do a tremendous. It's going to be tremendous in the community of advocacy, in the suicide awareness that he is now promoting on his book tour. Now, we all know that there's 22 veterans a day, that commit suicide. And, you've always said, look, it's got its pros and its cons, but mostly cons. And you also believe that the movement is, somewhat misguided at best. And in most cases, it's damaging. Do you mind to explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. We get into the weeds a little bit with this, and I know, because I want to explain that I think the movement itself doesn't lend a positive outlook. The people inside of it are well-meaning people. There are people that are inside of there, in the large majority, that are there to help. And so I have to be careful not to admonish them or insult them. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you focus on 22 veterans a day, you miss the point, because a veteran didn't hang himself. A 5-year-old boy did. That's what I was when I did it. The veteran, if you would have called and told me, hey, buddy, you're a Marine infantry corporal, you have the tools, I'd have been, for one, I wouldn't have picked up your phone call. I don't care. I didn't care at that time. That was not, a Marine wasn't hanging himself. A 5-year-old boy was, a high school kid was. That's what was happening. I was gone long before anybody saw the drop. And so when we focus on the 22 vets a day, what we end up doing, and this is what I saw time and time again, because they put me on a national circuit of going and speaking to families and people who were struggling. What we were doing was we were actually giving people a self-fulfilling prophecy. We weren't giving them the tools to solve suicide. We were giving them an option when they were depressed, that they get to be part of the 22, and then they can have honor. They could be honored by their friends as, oh, he was one of the, for their first time, they could feel something, even though they would be dead and gone, they would be part of something. And I saw it time and time again, because I'd have kids or people who had just gotten out of the military come and speak with me and say, yeah, I'm really struggling. And we would talk for 3 months, and boom, I'd get the phone call and they killed themselves. And not only did they kill themselves, their friends closest to them would do it. And it became a point where I was noticing that suicide was a genocide. It had nothing to do with murder of self. It was murder of everybody around you, is what it becomes. And the more we were talking about 22 and 22, we were missing the point of who was actually killing themselves, because veterans weren't killing themselves. 5-year-old boys were killing themselves. They just happened to be 33 at the time. And so that's what I meant by that. Was I understand that these people, that there was 22. I've read the reports, probably more than most people have read them. I've read those reports, and I get it. But if you focus on that last moment of, we can save him with a crisis call, we can save him with the medals on his chest, or his family will stop him. That's not true. It happened years ago. For one, in that doorway where I did it, at the time, my 3-year-old son was standing there watching me do it. That didn't stop me. He was standing right here watching me in the noose. And it didn't stop me. It didn't stop me at all. The fact that I had 2 kids at the time did not stop me. And it doesn't stop them. And I saw that story time and time again when I would go hang out with families, and spend time with them, where I'd go to funerals of people who committed suicide. They would say, why did it happen? He had a loving family, he had kids, I'm like, because he's the kid that killed himself, not the veteran.
You are 100% absolutely correct. And let me explain. I have done 121 podcasts. I've probably had, 50 Marines. Mm-hmm. And I always ask, tell me a little bit about your childhood. Where were you born? Where were you raised? What was your life like growing up as a kid? And the first thing they always say, I'm talking like 95% of them, say that they didn't have a father figure in their life. Mm-hmm. They grew up fast. They had to take care of their family. They had to have a job, and not having that father figure in their life, I think really damaged so many recruits, if you will, which went to boot camp to become Marines, Uh, Perhaps they were looking for some leadership. They were looking for some guidance. They were looking for some structure that has been out of their life, their entire existence. And so when you say that 5-year-old killed himself, I could totally attest to that. Look, I grew up without a father even.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many Marines out there and a lot of veterans out there for that. They have that missing link, and that will follow you your whole entire life unless you face it head on. And the majority of us will never do that because it hurts. And going back there is very painful. And I do respect your vulnerability in this, to really bringing a different talking point to something that is very serious, that I think is really going to open a lot of eyes and say, damn, you know what? That is true. Now, you are now remarried, and you're living your best life. You're a keynote speaker. You're kicking life's ass, and you're happy, and you're very proud of this book that you have put out. Now, we have just a few minutes left here, and I want to give you an opportunity to give, a 1-minute elevator pitch on really maybe something really unique in your book that can maybe draw folks that will go ahead and purchase that book today after this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I will give you an elevator pitch, and then I will tell you why it's going to be very difficult too. This is a book from beyond the mind of suicide. I'm writing from a standpoint of somebody who did it, not from a standpoint of somebody who advocates for or was on the outside looking in. I'm writing to you as a dead man. And that's how I lived my life for many years, a dead person. And when I saw what I had done to others, what I had done to my wife and my family, I knew a change needed to be made. I never wanted to do that again. And when I realized that suicide was a genocide, I knew a change needed to be made. And so I did. I made the change, and I did it for not just me. I did it for everybody, because I believe this world needs something new. This world needs something that will solve this epidemic of suicide, not just bring awareness to it. And the part that is going to keep people out of it was the day that I figured out what I needed to do, was the one word that is going to keep most people from taking on this challenge, and it's forgiveness. I had to forgive myself, and I had to forgive those. I had to forgive getting pushed out of the treehouse. I had to forgive those kids. I had to forgive the kids that beat me up. I had to forgive the people who killed my friends. I had to forgive everybody, and there was no limits to it. None. There was nobody that escaped forgiveness because this, because that. And even the darkest things in the world, once I realized who I was as a person, I was no longer just body, mind. I was body, mind, and soul. Once I realized that this soul was operating the computer, and everybody else in their life is operating the computer, and they're fighting the same battle that I was fighting, small or large, everybody deserved forgiveness and a way out.
Wow. Truly, truly, truly inspiring, truly fascinating. And I can't wait to read the book personally. And, I just want to thank you so much for, again, coming on the show today, Aaron. We sincerely appreciate everything you have done and continue to do, not only in the military and the veteran community, but in the community as a whole. And your service and your sacrifice and dedication to our great nation is truly admirable.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Folks, be sure to go and get Aaron's book today. It is available everywhere books are sold online. You can connect with Aaron at aaronchildress.com. He's a keynote speaker. He's an author. And his new book that he is now telling his story, these thousands of days, this is what I learned after I killed myself. Folks, remember to stay inspired, stay encouraged, stay motivated, and always stay in the fight. Until next time, for Today with Tally, this is Brian Tally. Good night, Semper Fi, and God bless.